There was a Christian professor who taught a philosophy class, and at one point in time she assigned her students to write a paper on the nature of truth, and specifically whether truth was absolute or relative. Well, one of her students gave her his paper back and was advocating for the position that there really was no absolute truth, that everything was totally subjective, totally relative, and that really there wasn't even any truth about what was right and wrong, that morals were all matters of taste and preference, and that no one could really tell someone else that they were wrong about what was right. Well, the student got his paper back and saw that although there were no markings on the paper itself, it had an F on it. So he furiously stormed up to the teacher and said, "What's the meaning of this? Why did I get an F?" The teacher just smiled and said, "Well, when you gave me your paper, you had it inside a teal-colored folder. I don't like teal folders, so I gave you an F." Well, the student was astonished at this and said, "Well, that's not right. You can't do that. That's not fair. You need to grade me on the paper, not on the folder that I gave it to you in." The professor responded, "But didn't you say that there was no absolute truth, that even morals were just matters of taste and preferences?" "I don't like teal folders." This example really shows the foolishness of attempting to base one's life on anything other than absolute truth. Today I'm going to be answering the question, how do you know that there is absolute truth? And doing that in 3 points. First, that belief does not determine reality. Second, the Bible teaches that there is absolute truth. And finally, that we must believe biblical absolute truth. Let's jump right into the first point. That is, belief does not determine reality. History is filled with examples of sincerely held beliefs that turned out to be wrong. For example, at one point in time, the majority of people on Earth believed that the Earth was flat, whereas we now know it to be round. Or for decades, people believed that maggots would spontaneously generate out of decaying meat. There was even a scientific law of spontaneous generation. Ultimately, this was disproved by Louis Pasteur. Or Galileo Galilei was put under house arrest for the last 10 years of his life for questioning the geocentric view that the sun moved around the Earth. We now know that Galileo was correct in saying that the Earth goes around the sun. Medical discoveries have caused great changes in society, but doctors used to use methods like bloodletting or trepanning, which is drilling holes in someone's head, in order to try to heal them. Oftentimes, while the doctors believed that these methods would work, they did more harm than good. I could believe that if I let go of one of these cards, it would fly up instead of down, but regardless of whether I believed it or not, I would be wrong because of the laws of gravity. Or Islamic terrorists believe that they're doing the will of God, but they're incorrect. Their beliefs, relative to them, do not affect absolute truth. An anonymous author once wrote, "Sincerity is not a test of truth. It is possible to be sincerely wrong." Our own beliefs do not determine reality. Absolute truth determines reality. Second, the Bible teaches that there is absolute truth. One specific example is that the Bible teaches that there's only one way to heaven. If there's going to be any truth that people want to be relative, it's this one. When people say that there's no absolute truth, oftentimes it's specifically to get to this point where they can say, well, all religions are equal. You just follow God. It's like a mountain. God's at the top of the mountain. Everyone has their own path up the mountain. But the Bible says otherwise. In the Bible, it's recorded that Jesus said, "I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father but by me." So ultimately, the Bible teaches that there is absolute truth. Specifically, one absolute truth it clearly teaches is that the only way to heaven is through Jesus. Then finally, last point, we must believe biblical absolute truth. We have to hold some beliefs. For example, we can believe that we're sinners because Romans 3:23 says that all have sinned. We can believe that God sent his Son because of John 3:16. And we can believe that Jesus is the only way to God because of John 14:6, where Jesus says that he is the way to God. Ultimately, if we don't want to live like the student whose paper was rejected just because of the teal folder, we have to submit ourselves to believe biblical absolute absolute truth.